Hello guys, I'm Tracy De Las Llagas from Dev 206 Section D. In the previous video, my groupmate RJ gave an introduction about writing print communication materials. He also started a discussion about the principles of clear and effective writing to achieve readability. I am here to pick up where he left off and tackle principles 4 to 7. Principle number 4. Use specific, concrete language. According to our reference material in Dev 206 by Lustria, Tabing, and Osalia, if you want to convey a clear message to your reader, do not be vague. Do not use generalizations. Vague is defined by Merriam-Webster as not clearly expressed. As DevCom practitioners, being vague is a mortal sin. Let's look at the example given in our textbook. She failed to attend the meeting because she was indisposed. What's vague about this sentence? The meeting is one of the vague points here. What was the meeting about? Is it an important meeting? And then indisposed means unavailable. Why is she unavailable? Is she sick? Is she not ready? Does she have other things to do? A precise way to rephrase this sentence could be, she couldn't attend the investors' meeting because she had a fever. Here are other examples. Hemingway was a great writer who wrote interesting books. For those who don't know Hemingway, it would be helpful to give some more information about him and specify why his books are interesting to the writer. Thus, a more precise way to rewrite the sentence would be, Hemingway was an American writer whose vivid language and life experience portrayed through his works helped me write my own novels. Here's another example. My officials are monitoring this situation very closely, and I can promise that we shall take all appropriate measures to ensure that the situation is resolved in a way that is fair to all the parties involved. Despite the appearance of having promised to do something specific, the minister has not really promised to do anything at all. What are the appropriate measures? They could be anything or nothing. What does fair to all parties mean? We have no clear idea. Such phrases are inherently vague and can mean almost anything. People who use them should be challenged to say more precisely what they mean. Vague writing is writing that doesn't communicate much, if it communicates anything at all. So, lesson learned, when sentences are too general, this will leave your readers with more questions than answers. You'll end up leaving your readers confused or annoyed. Principle number 5. Avoid using jargon or too many technical terms. Jargon or technocracies are words that are understandable to people trained in a technical or specific field, which may seem strange to the other people who haven't had the same exposure or training. Let's look at our textbook example again. If you want healthy kids, keep them away from low nutrient per calorie density foods. Can you spot the jargon here? This statement looks like it came from a nutritionist. It would be more understandable for the general public to say, if you want healthy kids, keep them away from junk foods. Gary Provost, one of the most beloved writing instructors in the US, author of 100 Ways to Improve Your Writing, said, do you know what a mandible is? Your dentist does. She uses that word every day. So if you are writing a story just for your dentist, use mandible. But if you are writing for everybody else, use the more familiar word, jaw. Lesson learned? Jargon is unnecessarily complicated language used to impress rather than to inform your audience. Avoid sounding fancy and stick to words that your readers will recognize. Principle number 6. Be careful when using idioms. Idioms are figurative expressions used in everyday language. Unfortunately, they are sometimes used incorrectly. Let me give you some examples that may be obvious to us that it sounds funny. Example, a blessing in disguise. It should be a blessing in disguise. This one seems to make a little sense as if we're referring to a blessing from the heavens. However, this idiom is meant to describe a blessing that may not at first appear to be a blessing. Here's another example, doggy dog world. It should be dog eat dog world. When you're describing the brutal and cannibalistic nature of the world, make sure not to refer to it as some canine-dominated cosmos. Unless you have a career out of making dog puns, you'll want to get this one right to avoid embarrassment. Example number 3. Nip it in the butt. It should be nip it in the bud. The idiom should not be referring to a small dog bite in the rear. Instead, it refers to stopping something in its early stages of development, utilizing the analogy to a plant that has not yet had the chance to bloom. And another example, could care less. It should be couldn't care less. It's ambiguous to say that you could care less. Could you also care more? If you want to display to someone how little you care, tell them that your level of care is at an absolute minimum and that you couldn't care less. Example number 5. Deep-seated. It should be deep-seated. While you may be tempted to make another plant analogy when referring to a deeply rooted emotion, stop yourself and instead refer to the depth of one's seat. While deep-seated may seem to make more sense, it also makes sense that it is difficult to rise when you are sitting in a seat that sinks deep into the ground. Another example, for all intensive purposes. It should be for all intents and purposes. No matter how intense your purposes may be, you want to be sure to write about the intents and purposes when you are trying to describe how something is practical for all purposes. So, lesson learned. When you make a mistake with your grammar or an idiomatic phrase, you risk putting yourself in a position of inferiority if your agency catches your blunder. Now we move on to principle number 7. Keep your sentences short. Long sentences are hard to understand. The average sentence length for most newspapers is about 17 to 20 words per sentence. How do you trim your sentences? Here are some tips. 1. Punctuate your sentences. Tip number 2. Edit your sentences. And tip number 3. Rewrite your sentences altogether. Verlin Klinkenborg, another widely admired American writer-teacher, who wrote several short sentences about writing, said, "Many people assume there's a correlation between sentence length and the sophistication or complexity of an idea or thought, even intelligence generally. There isn't. This doesn't mean all your sentences should be short. There are instances where you can use longer sentences to emphasize a point. But try to keep sentences short. Also, keep in mind that you should not sacrifice good transition in between ideas." Gary Provost has an interesting take about finding the right combination of short, medium, and long sentences. So let's read the words highlighted in gray. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stock record. The ear demands some variety. We move on to the next paragraph, wherein he varies the length of his sentences and see the effect. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I am certain the reader is rested, I will engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, sound that say, listen to this, it is important. So write a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ear. Don't just write words, write music. So lesson learned, keep it short. Delete unnecessary words. Find your rhythm. Short sentences are easier to read. It's as simple as that. So my discussion ends here. Thank you for watching, and I hope I was able to help you understand better and apply these principles.